What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Get Over Yourself podcast. Joined with me today is Christian Espinosa. Christian, he is a lovely man. He's going to be telling a lot about his business journey as well as his journey of improvement throughout his life. But before we jump in and introduce you fully to Christian, I want to tell you a little bit about him. He's a celebrated author of The Smartest Person in the Room. It epitomizes the transformative journey from striving to be the brightest to embracing wisdom and courage. His sequel, The In Between, Life in the Micro, reflects his evolution towards compassion, aiming to uplift humanity. Leading Blue Goat Cyber, Christian focuses on the niche of medical device cybersecurity, highlighting his extensive background in cybersecurity, keynote speaking, and more. Beyond his professional pursuits, and this is where it gets really good, everybody, Christian is an avid thrill seeker and explorer with notable achievements in skydiving, scuba diving, and endurance sports, embodying his belief in transformative leadership and the value of diverse life experiences. Christian, quite the bio, but let's hear from the man himself. Everybody, welcome Christian. Thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Brandon.
Christian, what got me so intrigued about talking with you originally, you sent me a message and you talked about how you've done, correct me if I'm wrong on the number, 24 Ironmans, is that right?
That's correct. Yeah,
Yeah.
24 Ironman triathlons.
Yeah, I'm in training right now for my first one, and so when I saw this message, I said, "Okay, I'll take it as a sign from God that I need to talk to Christian Espinosa." And so ever since then, it's been kind of a little bit of a journey. And it's a couple months ago that we first connected, and now here we are. You have such a story to tell to everybody through business pursuits, through life pursuits, through crazy life experiences that have happened to you, that you've been affected by, but also ones that you put yourself into your own realm. You went and experienced things that you wanted to experience. So many amazing things you could be talking about today. I want to start off though. You are a thrill seeker, and that's kind of in your bio there. I've seen pictures, and I'll put all these pictures in the video description, everybody, if you want to go check it out. I'm sure they're on your social media as well, but I've seen pictures of you hanging upside down on an airplane. I've seen pictures of you with crampons scaling up the side of an ice cliff. Like, what's going on there?
I am attracted to things that have a waiver, things where you could like lose your arm or die for some reason. That risk and managing that risk and that challenge is what I find attractive. A lot of people think I'm careless or reckless, which is totally not the truth. Any of the activities I do, I make sure I am trained. I have in skydiving a reserve parachute, an automatic activation device, a helmet, two altimeters, and jump at the right altitude and all that stuff. So the things you can do to minimize the risk, but I just like stepping out there and living on the edge. I think that forces me to grow in different ways.
I like that. And that's what the show's all about. I mean, it's get over yourself. It's getting out of your comfort zones. It's putting yourself in
Yeah.
these different situations that may not make you feel comfortable in the moment, but after you just feel a sense of urgency, you feel alive, you feel like you can take on the world. And coming from personal experience, I've only gone skydiving once. One time I did it, I just graduated high school. My brother goes, "All right, let's go do this thing." It's like a little fun senior trip. So we go skydiving. Did not tell the mom at first. She was not very happy, but as we're going up, I'm thinking this is going to be the coolest experience of my life. We're having fun. We got our instructors with us because we've never done it before. And as soon as they open the door in this tiny little plane we're in, the wind comes rushing in. Everything got real. Me and my brother's face, we turned ghost white. And we're like, "Are we about to
Yeah.
do this?" And he jumped first, and so all of a sudden, I just see my brother, boom, disappear. I can't see him anymore in the sky. I'm like, "All right, well, if you did it, I'm not backing out now." So that feeling, it is a feeling of just wow. You can't really describe it until you've done it. So in your personal life, you like those feelings. It seems like you do these kind of experiences to get out of your comfort zone, to get out there. What got you going in it in the first place? And what are some life lessons you've learned having done some of these endurance sports, some of these crazy experiences that not everyone can say they've gone through in their life?
I think I've always wanted to do something where I'm uncomfortable. I've always sought that experience. I feel like I'll learn something about myself in the process and I'll become more resilient. And even if I, quote, don't finish or don't summit the mountain, then the journey is part of the experience. I will still learn something from that journey, especially about myself. With, you mentioned 24 Ironman triathlons. That's kind of like a lifetime in one day. The way I look at it, it typically takes me like 13 hours to finish or so. And you start up at you start at the sun's barely coming up and I finish at night. So it's like the entire day. But you go through in that one day of 13 hours from sun up to sundown, you go through this entire range of emotions that you go through your life. You know, some moments you feel great, some moments you feel horrible. I remember like laying on the side of a road in the fetal position in Ironman, Wisconsin once, and I'm just vomiting. And I'm like, man, I don't think I can finish this race. And I just sat there for a while or laid there for a while and like looking at my puddle of vomit in front of me. And some people were walking by or running by, they would stop and offer some help. And someone, stopped and kind of helped me up and helped me walk for a while. And then they took off, but I started walking. And then later on I started running and I felt good again. So it's like weird. I went from this like super low point to feeling euphoric again and running and also feeling gratitude for these people on the journey with me that actually stopped and helped. They interrupted their race or their experience to help me. So that camaraderie was uplifting as well. And that just made me realize, like in business and anything in life, you have these valleys, and we're always going to have a valley. But what matters is what steps we take to get out of the valley. And it may not be quick at first, but as long as we're making the steps, that ultimately is what matters. And I feel like a lot of the endurance sports for me have really reminded me of that and given me some more resilience.
There's so many life lessons to be learned through team sports, through any type of exercise. And right there, I love that camaraderie you're talking about. You're sitting there in your
Mhm.
own pile, your own puddle of vomit after going through something just incredibly, incredibly difficult. And I applaud you for being able to do 24 of these things. Heck, I'm in training right now, and it is difficult to begin with. And so I could just picture this. You're laying on the side of the road, you got puke all next to you, you're feeling horrible. And that's when your mind starts racing. You think, wow, I did all this training. Am I even going to be able to finish this race? I'm on the home stretch. I'm on the run, but can I finish the entire marathon? Like where your head was a scary situation. If you let it stay there too long, that's kind of when the
Mhm.
inevitable happens, and you throw in the towel and you say, all right, we'll get them next time. And that's life. Of course, that's going to happen on occasion. But I like that people came by. They were checking on you. These are people who are competing for their own times, making sure they're going to be able to get through
Mhm.
the race, keeping in mind that these are the people who were behind you at one point, and they're sitting there taking the time to say, obviously, they don't know your name, but hey, Christian, are you doing okay? Can I help you along this journey? And those kind of experiences in life, be it business, be it social life, be it physical life, spiritual life, that's a whole topic in and of itself. But these are life lessons that we need to apply right now. So next time, Christian, when you're in that kind of race and you see somebody else sitting on the side of the road, they're laying down, they're in that hurt locker right then, you could be that friendly voice to say, "Hey, you got this. Let's keep going." You could be that arm to stretch out and pick them on up. So amazing life lesson there. And since then, you've also had some cool experiences. We've already talked a little bit about skydiving, but I want to hear more about some of your journeys. If you've summited a couple of the world's tallest peaks, you've done some crazy adventures,
Mhm.
backpacking, hiking, things like that. So tell us a little bit about that and some lessons you've learned in there as well.
One of the lessons I learned is on Mount Elbrus. It's like this one of the seven summits, the highest peak in Europe. And on that summit, the day we were summiting, it's about a 45-degree angle, and you have to kick in with your crampons and make a basically a step in the slope. And I sort of lost my focus for a second, and I didn't kick in hard enough, so my foot gave loose. And then next thing I know, I'm on my back sliding down the mountain. I'm accelerating pretty fast because it's like a, a pretty steep slope and it's snow. And it all happened very quickly. And I just remember, man, if I don't like stop myself, I'm gonna like hit the bottom and die, basically, or get severely maimed. So I knew what to do. So I flipped over and dug my ice axe in and dug my crampons in and self-arrested, as they say. And that moment just made me realize, man, the power of being present. Just this one little drift in my attention, you know, almost has some severe consequences.
Mm.
And I had to hike, climb back up to the rest of the team as a team. And then after that, I was like super slow. I was like the slowest person because I was kicking in, 15 times each. So I didn't want to fall back down. And then we're going across this like narrow, super narrow thing. Everyone else is walking, and I'm like, crouched to the ground, almost crawling across. It gave me it was a very humbling experience. It made me realize, there's not a lot, there's some things are not guaranteed, and some things you really need to make sure you are fully present in. And, I write about that in my second book, that moment. I call that a micro moment. And I didn't have enough intention in that moment because it was something where the consequences are severe. And I like those extreme sports because a simple mistake like that can cause you, your life potentially. And it's just a reminder that, we need to be present. We need to stay focused.
It's a very interesting take on extreme sports, saying I like doing this because it could take my life. But you're right, you have to be present. And I want to dive into that a little bit. So your new book, it's your second book you've ever written. We'll get into the first here in a little bit, but your book you got now, The In Between Life in the Micro. You talk about a story where one day you were driving, I believe it was with your business partner, and all of a sudden there's a car wreck right in front of you and you had to act very fast. Tell us a little bit about that moment and kind of what it meant to you in that moment and what it's taught you since.
I had about three different topics I was thinking about writing the next book on. And one of them was those micro moments. I was in my girlfriend and I, as my girlfriend at the time, we were driving back from St. Louis, the airport. And
Mm,
on the way, there was a big semi truck. The tire blew out on the highway, and like chunks of the tire flew off and hit the car. And like she ducked, thinking it was a gunfire because a lot of gunfire in St. Louis. And then a little bit further along the way, there's like these buckets fell off this truck, and they're bouncing along the highway, and I had to like dodge these buckets. And then later, I was at this intersection, and that's when that car wreck happened. Is a pretty fast intersection, and a truck T-boned a car, pretty high speed, and we were right behind the truck. The truck was pulling up, and the car T-boned it, and the truck got pushed back and hit my vehicle. And it was a very busy intersection as well. So my partner, she got out. She's a nurse, and I got out of my van. We weren't hurt because I backed up a little bit, and we were just barely hit. And the woman that was in the car got out in complete shock. There's like pieces of glass falling off of her. She's got blood all over her, and she's just, I don't know where she thought she was going, but she got the car immediately and started walking, kind of like stumbling around the intersection.
yeah.
And she went and helped her to the ground because the woman, fainted. And it was just interesting to me, that whole experience, because no one else got out of the car at the intersection and offered to help. There was
Mm,
one other person that was behind us, and I asked her to call 911. Other than that, everyone else just sat in the car looking frustrated and filming the scene, and just not even offering to help. So that struck me as interesting. And then, really, the woman that was severely injured, the only thing she wanted was to talk to her husband, and she didn't know where her cell phone was. So she, after she kind of hit the ground, and Melissa helped her to the ground, and then she got back on her, not on her feet, but a little gain consciousness. She gave me the number, and I called her husband and kind of relayed the scenario to her husband, and then gave her the phone. And I think, in that moment, we often think of all this stuff that, I guess in that moment, it brought everything crystal clear to me. Like, all this stuff we're going after, like these goals and these things that we think are important, in a crisis like that, where you think your life is on the line, those things don't matter. The only thing that matters is talking to you, in that case, her husband. And I felt, uh, that was what I need to write. That moment solidified the topic of my book, because uh, I've neglected to appreciate moments like that right in front of me. And I'm not saying in a moment of crisis. I'm just saying in general, like the small moments with people that matter. I've been neglected to appreciate those, at the because I was pursuing, some big goal or trying to grow my business to a certain degree. And now I'm working more to balance those out.
mm. So many takeaways to be told in that story. First and foremost, were all these events that happened between when your girlfriend at the time thought she was getting shot at versus the barrels dropping off the car versus this entire car wreck that happened, was this on the same trip?
Yes, it was all on the same trip, and I felt like, man,
St. Louis, man. Holy cow.
this. Well, that's never happened. That doesn't happen like every day in St. Louis. That's the only time that's ever happened. I'm like, man, this is like the universe telling me something. That there's three things and then this
For
accident,
real.
and then
Holy cow.
yeah,
That is insane. So yeah, diving into that a little bit, you have this entire crazy set of events happen, and then kind of the climax of it all is this car crash right in front of you. And to think that
mhm,
that truck, when you guys had the green light, that one could have gassed it and got around it, and you guys could have been that car that is getting T-boned. Like
yeah,
these little moments in life, you never know what to expect. And it kind of shocks me that not everyone got out of their car and not everyone was trying to help in some sort of way. And first and foremost, I applaud you and your girlfriend at the time for the effort that you guys put in to make sure everyone was okay. That takes courage in and of itself, especially like you said, it's a busy road. You got to make sure you're not going to get injured. You set
right.
aside your own needs at the time to go help somebody else. And what kind of life lessons does that take away for us as kind of the bystanders in this situation? Everyone who's listening to this podcast, we're a bystander in this story. Where can we go forward now to recognize some of these crashes inside of our life? There's obviously the very physical examples like you experience where there's these moments that people need our help. You had that moment on your triathlon. You were able to help that person in the car wreck. You had these moments. But where
Mhm,
else inside of our lives? Maybe it's not always the physical moment. Maybe it's the moments where we need to step back and somebody's struggling with their faith. Somebody doesn't know why they're here on this earth. Maybe it's the struggle of depression, right? Somebody's going through the ringer. They feel like they have no purpose. They feel like nobody loves them. They feel like they have no connections. That's the moment you need to step in there. So looking back now, Christian, you're obviously a big proponent of kind of taking a step back, stop worrying so much about the future and focus on the present, these little micro moments like you put them. Where can we as the listeners, the Get Over Yourself podcast, start adopting some of these things? Because it's not easy to do. I've tried time and time again to go in that exact same situation where I say, I need to stop worrying so much about the future and worry about the present. But you do it for a couple days, you do some very task very good in the present, and then
right.
life happens and you start scheduling again. Where do you work on that? How do you become equipped for that kind of moment?
Well, I believe like writing a book should be transformational to the author as well as anybody reads it. So the book was transformational for me. It's also a constant reminder for me to be congruent with what I have written. So I have to constantly remind myself because I'm very hyper driven, hyper goal
Mm,
oriented. And but when I look back on my life, uh, at the times that I was most vulnerable, somebody that was probably hyper driven, like in the Ironman triathlon, that helped me when I was on the side of the road throwing up. Like you said, they were behind me at some point. That really changed my life. It helped me finish the race. And I have to keep that in perspective. Like these small gestures we often don't think mean that much actually mean a lot.
mm.
Like I talk about this, I wrote about this story in both my books for some reason. I was going through divorce like a long, long time ago in like the 90s. And I was like super depressed and kind of messed up. And I remember at this grocery store in St. Louis, it's called Schnucks. And the person checking me out at the grocery store, she was, scanning the groceries. She just, I guess she could tell that something was wrong with me. And she stopped scanning, looked me straight in the eyes, and just asked me if I was okay. And I thought, man, this is such a small gesture, but it like changed my life. I mean, I'm talking about like 30 years later. So uh, it's like, it just showed me like these small things are really what matters in life. I think life is about achieving those goals, but also it's about how we feel on a day to day and minute by minute basis. And often we get the most fulfillment out of helping somebody else achieve something or helping somebody else feel great. Even a simple smile can change somebody's day.
You know what interests me? A lot of the story you're just speaking on, it reminded me of a study I learned, and I just pulled it up to make sure I'm not kind of quoting any false numbers or anything here. So it was a study done by Darley and Batson. So this it was from Babson College, and this Babson College, I believe it's a ministry college, so everyone's going there studying theology and becoming ministers. And so you would think pretty good group of people. If you're trying to become a minister, you generally want to help people. You want to follow the
Mhm.
example of Christ, serve other people, put other people's needs before you. That's the kind of students they had going to this university. And so they did this study. They had just recently studied inside of their class the story of the Good Samaritan. So, everyone passes them by. There's a person on the side of the road. Everyone passes them by. And the person who wasn't of their community, of their faith, of their group of individuals, a Samaritan walks by and he helps up the individual and takes him to the inn. He pays for the inn. Amazing story. We all know the story in the Bible. But they did a very similar experiment where They told all these kids, okay, your final presentation, it's going to be in this classroom on campus, and you guys have X amount of time to get it all done. So the kids, they're preparing for a week, they're getting all excited for it, getting ready for their final presentation. They show up to the one building, and it was, once again, it was a complete test. The students didn't know it, but the faculty did. So they show up to the building where they're supposed to give their final presentation. And as they get to the door, there's a notice on it saying, hey, your final presentation has been moved across campus to some other building. And there's a time slot on it. So these kids get there and they're like, oh my gosh, we're going to be late. So they start sprinting across campus to make sure they're going to make it. Well, as you can expect how the story goes, there's people on the side of the road on campus. There's people who need help. There's, in this case, the individual who is laid down, and they were testing their students to see if they would be the
Mhm.
so-called good Samaritan. That's what their final presentation was on. And it says right here, only 10% of seminary students in the hurry condition stopped to actually help the man. And I think that's the key for all of this, Christian, what you've been talking
Mhm.
about, these life experiences. We get so caught up on our own issues. And granted, we're the authors of our own story. We're the main character in the movie. And so when we get caught up in life and we want to go chase our dreams, chase our goals, build our companies, become the best physical version of ourselves we can be, that's our focus. And I'm not necessarily saying that's a bad thing, but when you have these students who prove that they're in the trenches, they're trying to help people, they're trying to become ministers here, and
Wow.
they miss that opportunity of being the Good Samaritan. How many of those moments inside of our lives are we passing up just because we're focused on ourselves, our future, our betterment, when in reality we could focus on the present and bettering ourselves, our communities, and our brothers and sisters here on earth by just looking to our right and stretching forth our hand and saying, hey, do you need some help up?
I agree. And I think a lot of people that get depressed, it's a focus on your own problems. And the studies that show if you help other people, you're not going to be as depressed because you shift the focus to other people.
So
And
true.
yeah, and at that intersection, what I often think about when it comes to a situation like that, if I am on the side of the road and injured, I would hope one of my fellow human beings would come along and try to help me. So I act from that point of view, thinking, if something happens, I've sort of helped other people. Maybe karma, somebody will help me.
Mm,
And yeah, so I try to act in accordance with that. And I've also been trained in a lot of these things, in emergency response and stuff. So maybe I'm more comfortable than other people, but sometimes it just anything helps. Just the reassurance. Like my girlfriend was reassuring that woman that things would be okay, and she's a nurse and she knows. And that woman is super grateful when the ambulance finally got there. They got her on a stretcher. The woman's like, "Where's that kind lady?" And that kind lady was my girlfriend, and she wanted to like give her a hug and thank her, just for that probably like 5 minutes of time
yeah.
that really changed that woman's life. And I think we often forget about that. We think it needs to be something major, but it doesn't.
Yeah. It never does have to be anything major. Another podcast I listened to, he was talking about donations. And so many times in life, everyone thinks that if you're donating something, it has to be something monetary. It has to be you
Mhm.
giving them cash, you giving them something that's worth of value. But there's so many things in life we could donate, and one of the most important ones is our time. So when you see that person struggling, when you know for a fact somebody needs your help, I know it can be very difficult, but just setting aside that time and making sure I'm going to be there for my friend, family member, anybody, the person on the side of the road, I'm going to be there for them. So, Christian, jumping over a little bit now, amazing topics we've been hitting so far. And as we kind of are getting close to the end of the episode here, I want to ask you a little bit more about Blue Goat Cyber and a little bit about your journey as an entrepreneur, some lessons you've learned inside of it, some difficulties, highs, lows, and everything in between.
Yeah, so Blue Goat Cyber is my second cybersecurity company. Our focus is on medical device cybersecurity. That is our niche. There's not a lot of people in that market. That's more of a blue ocean strategy versus a red ocean where you've got tons of competitors and it's kind of a race to commoditization. My first cybersecurity company I started in 2014. I sold it in 2020, and I made a lot of mistakes. Probably everyone that somebody would advise you not to make with your first company. I tend to just jump in and do things and try to figure it out. I thought, okay, I'll build a cybersecurity company. I'll sell everything cybersecurity related, and clients will show up. It's not like the Field of Dreams. Nobody showed up. So what I realized is I was trying to sell services to everyone, which effectively meant selling services to no one because my
Mm,
messaging was completely diluted. And it's counterintuitive as an entrepreneur, at least when initially you don't want to turn down revenue from all these different pockets. You feel like if you niche down too much, you might lose money at potential sales. So that's why with Blue Goat Cyber, our niche is purely on medical device cybersecurity. That's all. That's what we're going after. And that was only one small part of my previous cybersecurity company. So I'm trying to learn from the dumb tax that I feel like I've paid a lot of, because when I am able to niche down what we deliver, I become more of an expert in that area, and my messaging is much clearer because I fully understand my prospects a lot better and what their pain points are, and that helps me be in a better position in the market also, because there's only a few competitors in medical device cybersecurity, but with like penetration testing, which is what we did in my last company, there's like, you know, hundreds of thousands of competitors. So
mm.
that's that red ocean strategy. So I think, the things that I did not understand were marketing and sales. I didn't even know the difference when I first started. Now those are my focus, because without sales, it doesn't matter what you can deliver if you haven't sold anything. So it's always a balancing act. But right now, my emphasis is always on sales, because sales is like the driving, it's the input to get the revenue in to deliver the product to the client. Of course, the delivery process matters, but without the sales, it doesn't matter. And I didn't understand the importance of marketing and sales and niching down and a lot of other things when I first started my business. And then I made the mistake of selling my business, my first one, for stock, which sounded great when the stock was at $5, but I could never sell it when I was employed by the parent company. And when I exited, the stock went from $5 down to 10 cents. So all the money I thought I had, I just was watching it like a clock, just like an
Just tick
hourglass.
away, tick
It's,
away,
it's
tick
ticking
away.
away. Yeah, and I can only sell so much stock a day, so I just selling it on the way down. It's like, oh my goodness, I'm not doing this again.
Well, very good life lessons for yourself. For all the young entrepreneurs who listen to the Get Over Yourself podcast, if you're able to give them a piece of advice with their businesses, wide range of them between service, software, and everything in between, what would you tell them and why would that be?
I think this is a good theme of your podcast. I would say your ego is not your amigo. I think we often,
I
as an
like that.
entrepreneur, yeah, we often let our ego kind of drive things and want to prove that we're smarter or we can do it. And sometimes raising your hand and asking for help or talking to another entrepreneur is the best thing we can do. Otherwise, we're going
Mm,
to go much slower. Like with me, I joined some groups that have fellow entrepreneurs, and at first I was like, "Oh, I got it all figured out. I'm cool," and that wasn't working. That was my ego talking. So once I put that aside and said, "Look, what are you doing?" I'd ask somebody else, "What are you doing for sales? How do you handle this scenario? How do you handle these personnel issues?" Then it helped me scale much faster when I started looking to other people and putting my ego aside.
I like that. And real quick, I was gonna kind of have that one be the last one, but what you just said reminded me. You're an author, and so your first book, it was The Smartest Person in the Room. I want to hear a little bit about that real quick because I think these two things connect together.
Yeah, the first book I wrote because of my experience with my first cybersecurity company. When I zoomed out and kind of looked at most of the problems I had in the company, 99% of them were because my staff lacked emotional intelligence or people skills. And I realized that this is something that is a pandemic in cybersecurity and in high tech industries. We have these super highly rationally intelligent people, high IQ, that have like a very low EQ or almost no emotional intelligence. And I'm a believer that we get what we tolerate, and we've like tolerated this in the industry. So what I did when I realized that was a problem in my company, I started doing a lot of training. I started changing the culture. I started getting rid of people that didn't fit into the new culture. I established core values, and all the things that worked are what I wrote about in the book. And like I said, it was transformational for me, because when I started looking back at my life, I realized that I was one of the people in the past that let my ego get in the way and always wanted to be, quote, smarter than other people.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I felt significant. And we all want to feel significant. And once we decide like what makes us feel significant, it might be I'm, quote, smarter than you, then our ego does the best to protect that identity we created for ourselves. We're trying to look for a moment in a conversation to prove that we're smart. We're trying to like look for an opportunity to prove that someone doesn't know what they're talking about. This pans out in a number of ways. And I realized that I used to be one of those people. So writing that first book forced me to do a lot of reflection and increase my emotional intelligence and increase my awareness. And I'm still work in progress, like all of us. But yeah, that was the shift I made with my company, and I think that's extremely important as well. I shifted my hiring, which used to be purely based on technical skill and credentials. Now I don't even care about that. What I care about most is cultural fit, aptitude, and attitude. And then I'll hire them. I don't even look at the technical stuff till after I look at the cultural fit first, which was a
I
direct
love it.
opposite of what I was doing.
I love it. And what you said is so accurate. How at one point you realized, hey, I think I need to check my own ego at the same time. How many times are we going on and we always blame somebody else and it's their fault? It's always them, them, them. When if we could just sit back and say, it was probably my fault. I'll take the ownership on that one. Man, if we could all do that, I think life's problems would go away in a heartbeat. But awesome, Christian. I appreciate you for joining us on today's episode of the Get Over Yourself podcast. Everyone, if you want to hear more from Christian, more of his interviews, more on social media and whatnot, in the link description below, I'm going to be including everything of his. So make sure to go check that out. So once again, you do not miss anything that Christian puts out into the world. Also, go check out his books. Christian, where can they find your books? Are they on Amazon or Barnes & Noble? Where can we find them?
On Amazon and on Audible. My latest book was just released on Audible about a month ago.
Beautiful, beautiful. I'll go use my month's credit. Everybody go make sure to check out that book on Amazon Audible. And once again, go follow Christian. Guys, I appreciate you for listening. If you know anyone who benefit from hearing today's conversation, make sure to go ahead and share it with them. You're my best form of marketing so I can continue to grow the show. That all being said, we'll see you next time.